Second week, um, it was probably for many of you um, one of the more profound weeks in the course because we really talked about school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports. And this approach, while it's been out for probably a decade now, it is so dramatically different than what I think many of us either grew up with or experienced before, because there really is quite a focus on antecedent conditions, and it's very, very different. So we used to talk about, right, we talk about ABC analysis. So antecedent, those things that happen before a behavior, the behavior, and then consequences. And historically, many of the management programs that we've developed have really focused on consequences. So we'll wait for that behavior to occur, and then we consequate it, oftentimes with some punishment. School-wide positive behavior support turns that on its edge and says we're not waiting. It's ridiculous to wait for those behaviors to occur. Why don't we just teach those behaviors at the beginning? So from a school-wide positive behavior support, we looked around and we said, where are the challenges happening in our school? Where are kids getting into trouble? Where are we having some of our behavioral issues? And of course, we all know what the answers to that question is. It's in sometimes the most unstructured areas. That's why school-wide positive behavior support has focused so much on the playground at recess, the lunchroom, the hallway, the school bus, the bathroom. So those school-wide behaviors, teaching those procedures and routines at the school-wide level is really geared towards making visible and explicit the behaviors that are expected in those particular settings, because those are the settings oftentimes that are the least structured. And that's why we've had some of these really kind of fun things around doing videos or doing films showing examples of positive behavior in the bathroom and negative behavior in the bathroom, or positive behavior on the playground and negative behavior. So that's where that comes from. And so so it's a dramatic shift because we're not waiting for behavior, and we're also not assuming it. And it sounds ridiculous, but oftentimes, because everybody in this class understands behavior implicitly, we think that it's natural to know those behaviors. But we forget that kids who are coming to school is a foreign place for most of them. It looks nothing like their home. It looks nothing like the neighborhood. There is no place in those kids' lives that look like school. School is a very unique animal. And so maybe the closest thing might be something like Sunday school. But even in other settings like sports or clubs like that, those situations the kids are voluntarily there. And school is involuntary. Kids have to come to school. They have to learn all these different subject areas, etc. So in our thinking. One of the things that I think is shocking, and I'm guilty of it because this is something that I don't do, as someone who grew up in a family where I think behavior was just expected, and you had fairly severe consequences if you didn't behave. That positive reinforcement is not natural. It's not natural for me. I just expect my kids to behave. And of course, that's a huge mistake because none of us automatically learn things, right? We just don't, we learn by osmosis. We certainly do by being in situations. We learn by observing and watching. But for many kids, especially the kids who struggle, we know from research that they need direct, explicit, intense instruction. And so we cannot assume that these behaviors are understood. And so that's why the focus on teaching. And of course, what we've learned as the semester has gone along, that we're not just talking about behaviors, right? We're also talking about social skills as well. And that's Module 6, the module that we've just finished up, where we're really focusing on social skills training. Because we know that when we put students together in social skills groups, oftentimes they don't have the communicative skills, they don't have the language skills, they don't understand the discourse or the sequence, they don't know how to start a conversation, how to sustain a conversation, how to listen actively, to support another speaker, how to withhold their own emotions. So there's all of these tricky things that happen when children are put into social situations who don't have those social skills. All right, some other things in school-wide positive behavior support. We also talked and introduced the idea of tiers of support. And again, most of you in here, or nearly all of you, are familiar with tiers of support, either through RTI or PBIS, both the behavior. So this is not new, but those gradations are designed to capture all kids, and that's what is really, I think, is the unique and potentially powerful aspect of school-wide positive behavior support, is that there really are supports for kids who really struggle, and then for that very small group of kids that have severe behavior issues, that we want to have supports all along some type of continuum. We talk about, oftentimes we've talked in the literature, they're often talked about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 often being special ed, one-on-one, tier 2 being small group interventions, and then tier 1 what the whole school gets. That's beginning to go away because in fact you could be a child who might be receiving tier 2 interventions for reading instruction because you have dyslexia, but in behavior it's a non-issue. The behavior is not an issue. And so, but what's happening when we have those tiers is that what we're beginning to find is that people are beginning to label students, just like we would say that that kid has LD or that kid's emotionally impaired. Now we're starting to use a different labeling system. He's a tier 2 kid. He's a tier 3 kid. And so again, of course, you lose the child. And that's one thing that we really don't want to do. And so, and because you can be in different tiers in different areas. So even in RTI, for example, maybe you struggle with decoding, but you're very high in comprehension. So at comprehension, you would be at level, you're certainly a tier 1 student, but yet you need some extra decoding support. So you might be tier 2 or tier 3, where you're receiving more individual intense support. So those tier systems are questionable. One of the things that we really have focused on a lot in that second module was this notion that positive behavior support really creates a new school culture. And this is a big idea because I think so much of us, especially those of us who are individual teachers, we're used to working with our class, with our group of kids. But school-wide positive behavior support really, again, expands that vision. And what we know is that when students feel safe in their school, the behavior they bring to our class is dramatically different. So when students feel safe and they feel like they're in a safe and structured environment, that has carryover to the classroom. Okay, so for schools, so there is this school culture issue sets a set of standards and expectations for all of the students in the class, and that does in fact color and impact classroom and individual behavior management. And so we really want a culture, and it's very hard to explain culture, right? If you walk into the school, it's almost like a feeling that you get as you go in there. You know a school that's positive versus a school where it's strongly authoritative, negative, and punitive. Those are they feel different. The kids are laughing differently, they're interacting differently, they walk differently, they carry themselves differently, and that's a result of school culture. And so, again, it's one of those things you can almost feel. It's a tangible issue. Very common. It's a couple things with school-wide behavior support, positive behavior support. They oftentimes use these kind of broad ideas like be respectful, be responsible, be ready, be safe. Those are kind of broad kind of ideas or values. However, they're not behaviors. They're not operating. You can't measure those. You can't measure respect. You can't measure responsibility or readiness. You have to operationalize those. And that's where those matrices become so important. And that's where we get to the level of really labeling behavior. So for example, we can say, here is what being respectful in the bathroom looks like. When you're respectful in the bathroom, you walk in the bathroom. When you're respectful in the bathroom, you always flush the toilet after you're finished. When you're respectful in the bathroom, you take just enough soap that you need and you wash your hands quickly, not to waste water. When you're respectful in the bathroom, you keep hands and feet to yourself. So we define what it looks like and what it sounds like in each of those areas. So you have respect, for example, in the bathroom, what it looks like and sounds like. You have respect in the lunchroom, in the hallway, on the bus, and then on the playground. So that's where we really begin to define the behavior. Remember, we can't count something that's a value. So respect. So those you may have looked at those and said, "Whoa, hang on, time. Those aren't measurable. They're not. You're exactly right. That's why we need to go to that next step and actually begin to measure those." Okay.